Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a journey into a truly remarkable document. Excerpts from the Shaolin Monastery Chronicles, Volume 1.
Yeah, and this isn't just any old historical record,
Yeah.
Think of it more like a meticulously compiled portrait. It's from a very specific point in time, 1748, right in the middle of the Qianlong reign during the Qing dynasty.
Right.
But it's doing something really fascinating. It's looking back, centuries back, at the long, layered, and, incredibly rich history of one of the world's most iconic monasteries.
And our mission today is to really immerse ourselves in this chronicle. What does this particular book tell us about Shaolin's history, its significance that maybe other records don't capture quite the same way? We want to understand why this chronicle was even needed when others existed, dig into the fascinating history it documents, meet the key figures, explore the legends tied to the landscape, and really try to figure out what it tells us about Shaolin's enduring resilience, all while highlighting those, surprising, insightful details that make this document so valuable.
It really is a goldmine, honestly, for understanding Shaolin through the eyes of the scholars and officials who felt compelled, really compelled, to create this record back then.
And it's not just dry history, is it?
Oh, far from it. It's filled with personal accounts, official decrees, philosophical debates, and, even some stories that touch on the miraculous or the deeply symbolic. It's quite a mix.
So get ready. This is going to be a deep dive through centuries of tradition, challenge, and resilience, guided by the words compiled by these 18th century scholars and officials who undertook this massive effort to preserve a legacy they saw slipping away.
So let's start by really understanding what this source is and who created it. We're looking at a dedicated chronicle, right? Focused solely on Shaolin Monastery.
Okay.
And the compilers, they made a specific point in the prefaces to distinguish it from existing broader local gazetteers. They weren't just rehashing what was already written down elsewhere.
Right, they were just copying things.
No. They mentioned works like Fu Yuanding's Book of Song from the Ming Dynasty, or Jiāo Rúhéng's Gazetteer of Mount Songao from the Kangxi era. But those covered the wider region. This was like a laser focus just on Shaolin.
And that brings us to the crucial question, why this book now in 1748? What was the impetus?
Well, the driving force seems to have been this figure, Jiāo Qīnchǒng. He was actually a descendant of that earlier gazetteer compiler, Jiāo Rúhéng.
Oh, interesting connection.
Yeah, and he held the scholar title of Jurin, which was a pretty high-ranking degree achieved through those, rigorous imperial exams.
Just an educated elite figure.
Definitely. Deeply connected to the region's intellectual tradition. And he basically felt that despite Shaolin's immense fame and age, there wasn't a sufficiently detailed, comprehensive record specifically of its famous sites, its relics, its historical events. Something was missing.
And this wasn't just like an academic exercise for him, was it? The sources suggest it was more urgent than that.
Oh, absolutely. The sources really emphasize the challenge and the urgency of this task. Jiāo Qīnchǒng, he faced significant obstacles in just collecting the information.
Like what kind of obstacles?
Well, the text talks repeatedly about the impact of the vicissitudes of time, how things had been eroded by wind and frost, places burned in the fires of war.
Wow.
And even structures and relics being destroyed by common folk. Sometimes intentionally, like people looking for hidden treasures and statues, sometimes just through neglect.
So a lot of history was literally crumbling away.
It was. Many scenic spots and relics that were famous in earlier centuries had genuinely fallen into ruin by the 18th century when he was doing this work.
That must have felt like a real race against time, trying to salvage fragments of history before they vanished completely.
It absolutely was. He wasn't just, compiling existing records in a comfortable study. The chronicle explicitly states he had to actively explore remote areas around the monastery.
Out in the field.
Yeah, painstakingly searching among cliffs and crumbling walls, trying to piece together information from fragments of steles and single characters. This was real field work, driven by a deep sense of responsibility to prevent the loss of this long and illustrious history, as he put it.
So who else was involved in this massive undertaking? It couldn't have been just Jiāo Qīnchǒng working alone on something this scale.
No, it was a significant collaborative effort, which really underscores the importance placed on this project by the local and provincial government at the time.
Okay.
Jiāo Qīnchǒng was the initiator, the spark, but he had powerful official backing. Zhang Quelin, a vice commissioner that's a very high-ranking provincial administrative role, he wrote one of the prefaces.
It's a serious official endorsement.
Yeah, and he didn't just give a formal nod. He praised Jiāo Qīnchōng's dedication and also credited the local magistrate, Shī Yìzān. And what's particularly interesting is Zhang Quelin's personal connection. He mentioned that his own father and grandfather had served in this region. So there's this sense of family legacy and responsibility tied to the area, including the monastery.
That adds another layer.
It does. And crucially, Zhang Quelin ordered the book printed. That gave it official sanction and ensured its wider distribution, which was absolutely essential for preserving the record beyond just a single manuscript copy.
Right, getting it out there. And then there's Shī Yìzān, the magistrate of Dingfeng County, the local guy right there where Shaolin is located. He wrote the other preface.
Yes, Shī Yìzān was a key figure on the ground. And he seems to have been more than just an administrator. He clearly admired Shaolin's natural beauty. He was personally involved in supervising renovation work at the monastery.
Hands-on.
Yeah, and he was already tasked with compiling the county gazetteer anyway. So this made him uniquely positioned and, well, invested in Jiāo Yuanqing's project. The sources show he worked closely with Jiāo Yuanqing, proofreading his draft and contributing to the final compilation.
A real partnership, then.
It seems so. And Shī Yìzān specifically highlighted the vast forest of steels at Shaolin, lamenting that many inscriptions were sadly damaged or lost. This directly reinforces the critical need for this chronicle to record what remained before it disappeared too.
So this chronicle is really the product of a dedicated local scholar initiating the work, partnering closely with the sitting county magistrate, and then gaining that essential official backing and funding for printing from a high-ranking provincial official.
Exactly.
That combination gives this document real weight, doesn't it? And it tells us how important Shaolin was perceived to be by the state, even in the mid-18th century.
Absolutely. And the compiler list, it also includes chief editors like Chen Zhilu, a prefect, and Zhang Yu, a vice prefect. Yeah. Original compilers listed as Yi Feng and Jiāo Qīnchǒng, and various others involved in proofreading and publishing. It was a substantial scholarly and governmental project for its time, involving multiple levels of officialdom and expertise.
And the purpose they stated in the prefaces wasn't merely to create a historical record, like you said. They saw it as crucial for actively preserving this history, making Shaolin's historical and spiritual splendor widely known, and allowing readers, as Shī Yìzān and Jiāo Rúhéng put it, to enjoy a tour in their sleep.
Which is a lovely phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that maybe some of these sites were already remote or even in ruins, so the book allowed people to experience them vicariously.
Right. And Zhang Quelin went even further, didn't he? Explicitly stating his hope that readers would cherish and protect the monastery based on what they learned from the book.
It's a powerful statement. The act of compilation itself is framed as a call to future preservation.
Yeah.
And the timing is quite precise. The compilation was finalized and prefaced in 1748, the 13th year of the Qianlong reign, the Wuqin year. Jiāo Rúhéng's record of compiling is dated just slightly earlier, the end of winter in the 12th year, the Dingmo year, which suggests the intense work happening right around that specific time.
Okay, let's use the chronicle then to guide us back, way back to the very beginning of Shaolin's story, at least as these 18th century compilers understood it. This involved the foundation, the landscape, and the earliest history.
Right. So the chronicle places the establishment of Shaolin during the Northern Wei dynasty, specifically the Taihe era, around the late 5th century CE.
Okay.
And it wasn't just founded spontaneously. It was ordered by Emperor Shaowen, specifically for the Indian monk Buddhapadra, known as Batuo. This imperial decree, right at the outset, is a critical part of Shaolin's identity born from state sponsorship.
And the location wasn't just convenient, it was intrinsically significant, wasn't it? It's on Mount Song.
Exactly. Mount Song, described as the central of the 5 great mountains of China, occupying a truly scenic location. And Mount Song has this deep symbolic meaning in Chinese tradition, long predating Buddhism.
How so?
Well, it's described as the center of the world, where yin and yang, wind and rain converge, a phrase noted by the Prince of Hui in one of the steles. Jin Zongxi quotes the classic Book of Odes, calling it lofty and supreme, reaching to the heavens. So, locating a major Buddhist monastery here immediately placed it in a landscape already imbued with profound cosmological and cultural significance. It wasn't just any mountain.
And Mount Song isn't just one monolithic peak, right? There are the twin mounts, Taishi and Shaoxi.
That's right. Taishi is the main and taller peak, often associated with imperial ceremonies. But Shaoxi is particularly important for Shaolin. It's described as being located in front of the monastery.
Okay.
Characterized by its 36 peaks rising like a 1,000-petaled flower when you see it from a distance. Visitors like Yuan Hongdao and Wang Shixing are struck by its unique beauty, noting that it surpasses Taishi, although Yuan Hongdao adds that its strange beauty cannot be seen up close, only from afar. It has a kind of mystique.
Interesting. Then there's the five-teeted peak, Fēng, to the north of Shaoxi. What's its significance?
This peak plays a very specific role in the Chronicle's description. It's said to embrace Shaolin Monastery, physically cradling it within its contours.
Ah, like protective arms.
Sort of, yeah. Its 5 interconnected peaks are visually striking, sometimes compared to a phoenix spreading its wings. And perhaps most fittingly for a Buddhist sanctuary, the peaks are described as being round, like monks' hats.
That's quite an image.
It is. And the Chronicle also mentions a later tradition that symbolically links these 5 peaks to the future division of Chan Buddhism into 5 schools, adding this layer of religious interpretation onto the natural form of the mountain itself.
The monastery wasn't always known by the name Shaolin, though, was it?
No, it faced periods of upheaval even in its early history. During the Daxiang era of the Northern Zhou dynasty, this was around 579-580 CE, when Emperor Wu famously abolished Buddhism across his realm.
Right, a major persecution.
Exactly. During that time, the monastery was temporarily renamed Jiāo Temple. However, the old name Shaolin was restored during the subsequent Sui dynasty and has remained so ever since.
And did the sources say what happened during that abolition? Was it destroyed?
A Tang Dynasty Stele by Pei Kui confirms this precise history of abolition and restoration. It notes that Jiāo Temple was established out of filial piety, which suggests maybe it was repurposed, perhaps for a different religious practice or even secular use, rather than being completely destroyed, and then it was formally restored as a Buddhist institution. So this indicates an early pattern of survival and restoration that would, well, repeat throughout Shaolin's long history.
And Shaolin seems to have enjoyed strong imperial favor even before the Tang dynasty, right? Besides the founding emperor.
Yes, absolutely. From its very founding by Emperor Shaolin's order. Later, a Sui emperor granted the monastery a truly significant amount of land, 100 king, which is about 1,500 acres.
Wow, that's huge.
It's enormous. And it was granted from a military colony called Baigu. This wasn't just symbolic support. It gave the monastery substantial economic resources and a direct, tangible connection to the imperial power base through land ownership tied to the state.
But this early history wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? There were challenges, too.
Definitely not. The Chronicle explicitly mentions that at the very end of the Sui's Day era, which was a period of widespread unrest and the collapse of the dynasty, the monastery was plundered by mountain bandits.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, and this attack led to a fire that destroyed some of the buildings. However, the sources highlight a key detail, almost like a miraculous omen. The sacred stupa, presumably containing relics, miraculously remains standing, as noted on that same Pei Kui stele.
That's incredible.
It is, and this survival amidst destruction becomes an early symbol of the monastery's resilience and perhaps perceived spiritual protection.
That detail about the stupa is powerful. It suggests that even when structures fell, the core spiritual essence endured. Okay, let's move on to the figures who really define Shaolin in the popular imagination, the patriarchs of Shan Buddhism. The Chronicle gives us some fascinating details about them, going beyond just simple legends.
Absolutely. While Buddhapadra was the founder who established the monastery under imperial patronage, the Chronicle adds, well, a bit more color to his story. It mentions he came to China on the advice of a spiritual master, specifically because he hadn't attained enlightenment in India and needed affinity, a connection in China.
So it wasn't just a mission, it was part of his own path.
Exactly. It frames his journey not just as a missionary effort, but as a personal spiritual quest finding its fulfillment in this new land. He's described as teaching tirelessly at Shaolin, attracting hundreds of disciples, and being known for translating important scriptures.
Which scriptures?
His translation of the Dashabhumika Sutra at Shaolin, it's specifically mentioned, along with his student Huiguang commenting on it. And he's also associated with magical feats.
Like what?
Like the legend of him stopping water flow in the Tiger Ravine and causing sweet dew to fall while translating scriptures, which gives the Sweet Dew Terrace its name. These stories, while maybe legendary, embed his spiritual power directly into the landscape.
But the figure truly central to the Chan lineage at Shaolin, as the Chronicle tells it, is Bodhidharma.
Yes, the first patriarch. He arrived from the west, from India, and the Chronicle suggests his arrival fulfilled a prophecy, a point Shenjizi mentions. The famous story of him crossing the Yangtze River is alluded to. Shī Yìzān mentions it briefly, and Fu Ershi references the single reed. that classic image of his seemingly effortless journey across obstacles.
And the core of his time at Shaolin, the 9 years of wall-gazing meditation, that's the iconic image, isn't it?
It absolutely is. This is a central theme repeated by various authors like Jiāo Qīnchǒng, Luo Hongxian, and others. He secluded himself, facing a wall in silent meditation for 9 whole years.
And the chronicle pinpoints the location.
Yes, the wall-gazing cave, or Manbidong, on 5T Peak.
What did visitors find when they actually reached this legendary cave? According to the chronicle, it must have been quite an experience.
They describe a place of intense atmosphere. Visitors mention the chilling air inside a cave, even in summer, and the stone walls bearing these strange, ripple-like patterns. At the entrance, there's a stone archway with highly significant inscriptions. The first trace of the one who came from the west. Wow. And the place of silent origin. These titles immediately elevate the site to a foundational place for Buddhism in China, the very source of Chan. And inside, there's a carving depicting his successor, Huaik, standing in attendance.
And near the cave, there's that truly fascinating relic, the Shadow Stone. Tell us about that.
Yes, the Shadow Stone. A detail that really sparks curiosity. It's located inside or very near the wall-gazing hermitage complex built around the cave. Descriptions vary slightly, but paint a clear picture. It's a stone bearing an image.
An image of Bodhidharma.
It seems so. Wang Shixing calls it a stubborn-looking rock with a faint image of a monk sitting within the stone. Yuan Hongdao describes black markings bearing a striking resemblance to a portrait of an arhat. When Fēng says it's a white substance with black markings, like a foreign monk seen from the side.
And Wang Shixing noticed something really unusual about it, didn't he? Something about the stone itself.
He did. He points out that the substance of this stone is completely different from the rocks on the mountain. This detail elevates the stone from just a curiosity to something potentially, well, extraordinary, hinting at a non-local origin or unique composition, which he finds very strange.
That is strange. What did others make of it?
Well, Yuan Hongdao recounts an old monk's story that the stone actually came from a stream and could create shadows of water, trees, and clouds. But then Yuan Hongdao adds his own philosophical commentary, suggesting that focusing too much on the stone or the shadow is like adding legs to a snake, when discussing Bodhidharma's true essence, a very Chan perspective on not getting too caught up in relics.
Right, don't miss the forest for the trees, or the enlightenment for the stone. The chronicle also includes references to his famous and perhaps frustrating interaction with Emperor Wu of Liang.
Yes, that famous encounter. Shan Shiji mentions the emperor not understanding Bodhidharma's holy truth. Luo Hongxian frames their debate about merit, where Bodhidharma famously stated that true merit wasn't about building temples, but establishing Buddha lands everywhere, a direct challenge to the emperor's focus on material acts of piety.
Which the emperor didn't appreciate.
Apparently not. Wei Yanshuan discusses the master's departure with his sandals, being decided after this encounter, seeing it as the sage withdrawing when his profound way wasn't accepted by the ruler. But interestingly, Yanshuan also notes that Emperor Wu's later lamentations and sincere devotion, evident in his writings, show that despite lacking the immediate needle and mustard seed affinity for sudden enlightenment, the fundamental ruler-subject relationship, though strained, was ultimately fulfilled on a deeper level, in Yanshuan's view.
And the story of his departure wasn't quite the end of his presence either, according to the chronicle.
No, there's the famous story of Bodhidharma being seen by the official Song Yun on the Pamir Mountains after his reported death.
After his death.
Yes. He was seen walking gracefully, carrying a single sandal. The story, included in the chronicle, confirms the idea that his coming and going are not fixed, as Wei Yanshuan puts it, implying his enlightened state transcends ordinary life and death.
So what is Bodhidharma's ultimate significance within the chronicle's narrative? How is he presented?
Su Jin perhaps puts it most succinctly. He did not establish words or letters, directly pointing to the mind to see one's nature and realize Buddhahood.
The core Chan principle.
Exactly. He is consistently and emphatically referred to as the first ancestor of Chan in China. Luo Hongxian and Jiāo Qīnchǒng highlight his single transmission outside the teachings. This concept of a direct nonverbal transmission of realization, distinct from scripture-based study, is presented as the absolute key to his legacy at Shaolin.
Okay, moving on to the second patriarch, Huaik. His story, as told here, is just as pivotal and involves some really dramatic, even violent elements that highlight the depth of his seeking.
Very much so. Huaik was originally named Shengwang. The chronicle recounts a vision where a spirit told him to go south to find his master, a quest that eventually led him to Bodhidharma, meditating at Shaolin.
And then comes the famous story in the snow.
Yes, the story illustrating his unwavering sincerity in seeking the Dharma. It's central to his biography. He went to Shaolin, found Bodhidharma meditating in the cave, and stood outside, unmoving, all night in the snow until it was past his knees.
Incredible dedication.
This act of profound, unyielding sincerity finally moved the seemingly impenetrable Bodhidharma. It's told in the Eminent Monks section and echoed by various visitors who recounted the tale when they visited the site.
And the location of this legendary display of devotion is actually commemorated at Shaolin.
Yes, the Standing in Snow Pavilion is specifically mentioned in the Chronicle as the place commemorating this event, allowing visitors to connect with that moment of intense seeking and devotion.
But his demonstration of sincerity wasn't just enduring the cold, it involved a much more drastic act, didn't it?
It did. The Chronicle states that he cut off his left arm with a knife to demonstrate his absolute resolve and sincerity in seeking the Dharma from Bodhidharma.
He cut off his own arm.
Yes. The Eminent Monks section describes this as an example of attaining the way through diligent practice, doing what is hard to do. It's a powerful, perhaps even shocking, physical symbol of total surrender and commitment to the spiritual path. It shows how far he was willing to go.
That's intense. And their most famous dialogue, the one about pacifying the mind.
Yes. This is a cornerstone of Chan teaching, and its inclusion in the Chronicle underscores its importance to the Shaolin lineage. Huike tells Bodhidharma his mind is not pacified and asks for help. Bodhidharma instructs him to bring forth his mind so he can pacify it. Huike searches within himself, but of course cannot find his mind as a tangible thing.
Right.
Bodhidharma then declares, "Your mind has been pacified." This dialogue, simple yet profound, illustrates the fundamental Chan understanding that the restless mind, when sought directly, cannot be grasped as a separate entity. Its true nature is already empty, already pacified.
A classic Chan moment. After this, Huike fully received Bodhidharma's transmission, didn't he? Becoming the second patriarch.
Yes, he received the Dharma transmission, including the robe, the kasaya, as a symbolic sign of succession. He continued spreading the teachings and passed the robe to the third patriarch, Senkan, ensuring the lineage continued from Shaolin.
There are also physical sites within Shaolin's domain specifically associated with Huike's practice.
Right. The demon-subduing terrace, which is also called the heart-seeking terrace, linking it directly to that famous dialogue, is mentioned as a key site.
Where is it?
Geographical features and visitors like Wang Shixing describe it as a flat-topped rock, sometimes situated in front of the second patriarch's hall, sometimes described as being on a precipice. This is said to be where Huike practiced walking meditation. The second patriarch's hall itself is located on Alms Bowl Peak, or Boyufeng.
Speaking of Alms Bowl Peak and Huike, there's that really specific and surprising detail mentioned about that location, the wells.
Ah, yes. It's a detail that brings the legend right down to a tangible, even tastable experience. Geographical features and multiple visitors, including Wang Shixing and Zhu Mengyang, mention that Alms Bowl Peak contains 4 wells, and each one has distinct tasting water.
Really? How did they get there?
Well, the legend says they were created by Huike striking his staff into the rock. It's a small detail, maybe, but it vividly connects the spiritual power of the patriarch to the physical reality of the landscape in a very surprising, almost magical way.
That's fascinating. Beyond the main patriarchs, the Chronicle lists other notable early monks who contributed to Shaolin's reputation.
Yes, several others. There's Seng Chu, who was a student of Buddhapadra. Buddhapadra himself praised Senshou as the foremost in Chan's studies east of the Pamirs, which indicates his high status.
And he had some interesting stories, too.
She did. The Chronicle includes stories illustrating his spiritual power, like stopping 2 fighting tigers simply by touching them with his staff. And there's a fascinating interaction with Emperor Xuan of Qi, where he deliberately didn't immediately greet the emperor.
Why not?
He explained that he was actually preserving the emperor's blessings by not accepting the prostration offered to a monk of his stature, a very subtle point about merit and reverence. He was also said to know the location of a spirit who could control a local spring, further embedding the monks in the local spiritual landscape.
And Huiguang, the first native Chinese ordained monk.
Yes. Huiguang was Buddhapadra's student and became known as the Sage Shamayara. He was crucial in the early translation of scriptures and composed important commentaries, really helping to disseminate Buddhist teachings in China. He's also noted for successfully praying for rain during a drought, a tangible demonstration of spiritual efficacy that would have been highly valued by the local population and the state.
It's clear from the Chronicle that Shaolin wasn't just some secluded spiritual center off on its own. its history is deeply, deeply intertwined with the ruling dynasties of China.
Absolutely. The chronicle repeatedly demonstrates that Shaolin's fate and fortunes were often directly tied to its relationship with the imperial court. The Tang dynasty, in particular, is highlighted again and again as a period of great glory and close connection.
And the most famous example, the one that really established that legendary link between Shaolin monks and martial arts, is their role in helping Emperor Taizong, right?
Yes, this pivotal event is detailed on the Peguisella. The monks are described with quite a bit of political awareness as understanding where the spiritual mandate lay and recognizing to whom the people's songs of praise belonged.
So they chose a side in a civil war?
Essentially, yes. They intervened in a crucial conflict, helping the Prince of Qin, Li Shimin, who would become Emperor Taizong, defeat Wang Shichong's nephew, Wang Rinzai. Their action, capturing the rebel and bringing him to court, was seen as a direct contribution to the establishment of the Tang dynasty.
And Taizong's response was swift and generous, wasn't it?
Very. He praised their righteous and brave act, sent letters of consolation, and granted them substantial concrete rewards. 40 king of land, that's about 600 acres, and a valuable watermill at Beigu Manor.
That's serious patronage.
It is. This not only significantly increased the monastery's wealth and resources, but also solidified its privileged status through direct imperial favor. And Jin Zongxi's later visitor record explicitly points to this historical event as the origin of Shaolin monks being known for their martial skills to this day. One monk, Tanzong, was even appointed to a military rank, Grand General.
And the chronicle actually includes the text of the letter from Li Shimin as Prince of Qin to the monastery.
Yes, it's preserved as a stele inscription. It's a remarkable piece of primary source material. In it, he addresses the abbot, monks, and others, expressing his deep gratitude. He praises their clear understanding of the political situation and their decisive action against Wang Shichong.
He really valued their help.
Oh, absolutely. He explicitly states their merit is known at court and calls their act a fine example for others. He promises rewards different from the ordinary to honor their unique contribution and sends an official to convey his thoughts, even inviting some monastic leaders to meet him. It's a direct testament to the imperial recognition and special status granted to Shaolin right after this event.
And the imperial connection wasn't limited to Taizong. Later Tang emperors continued the relationship.
Yes, Emperor Gaozong, Daizong's son, visited in person and bestowed his own imperial calligraphy, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, written in the distinctive calligraphic style known as flying white on a golden stele, along with other gifts.
Flying white?
Yeah, it's a style with sort of streaky, rapid brushstrokes, very expressive. Later, Gaozong sent another imperial letter with just a single flying white character, Fi, meaning fly, inscribed on the wall, demonstrating a continued artistic and spiritual connection and adding layers of imperial presence to the monastery's physical space.
And Empress Wu Zetian, the only female emperor, she also features in the chronicle's imperial records related to Shaolin.
Their connection is documented, particularly concerning a place called Lingta Monastery, which appears to have been closely associated with Shaolin or located nearby on Mount Song.
Okay.
The chronicle includes a letter from her where she receives a report about new bamboo shoots sprouting at Lingta Monastery. She connects this deeply to her late mother's religious practice there, seeing the shoots as symbolic of her mother's vows and spiritual mind, expressing her longing for the Jetavana Garden, a famous Buddhist site in India. It's quite personal.
She also issued a specific edict about repairing Lingta Monastery, didn't she?
Yes, referring to it explicitly as a place of worship where her mother practiced. She ordered its repair via Sanxi, providing significant resources in the form of gold and silk. This demonstrates the power of personal imperial piety influencing state actions and resources.
Right, using state funds for personal religious motivations.
Exactly. She expresses her grief over her mother's death and her wish to build a bridge of merit for her by completing the repair work by the anniversary. The chronicle notes the stele for this edict was prominently located inside the mountain gate, indicating its public significance. And the Peikui stele also mentions auspicious signs seen during her era, like winter bamboo sprouting and a vine growing behind the stupa courtyard, which were interpreted as positive omens associated with the ruling house.
Okay, moving forward in time into the Ming Dynasty, we see continued significant imperial family support for Shaolin.
Absolutely. The Wanli Emperor's mother, Empress Dowager Cixing, was a major patron in the late 16th century. An edict from 1587 documents her immense donation. A supplementary Tripitaka, the entire Buddhist canon, consisting of 637 cases of scriptures.
Wow, 637 cases. That's enormous.
It's a priceless gift. essential for monastic study and practice. And Zhou Mingyang's visitor record mentions that Empress Dowager Shī Yìzān also specifically built the magnificent Vairocana pavilion to store this vast collection of scriptures. So she provided both the books and the library, effectively.
And support came from princely families as well, not just the direct imperial line.
Yes, showing a broader network of royal patronage. The Prince of Hui, known as Shu Yangzi, recorded his significant reconstruction efforts in 1553. After visiting ancestral tombs nearby, he saw the state of Shaolin and felt compelled to act.
What did he do?
He donated gold and oversaw repairs to key structures like the Sweet Dew Terrace, the Sutra Repository, the Abbot's Quarters, Fangzang, and he funded the building of the Standing and Snow Pavilion. He even notes an auspicious sign, a 5-colored cloud and golden light appeared during the work, suggesting divine endorsement of his efforts.
And other princes.
The Prince of Xinjiang, Zhu Huzun, wrote a stele for monk Biandan around 1568, mentioning Biandan's support for the imperial court. And Liu Yuyu's record about protecting cypresses mentions the Prince of Zhu's intention to promote Buddhism, further illustrating this network of princely backing for the monastery.
Finally, the Qing dynasty, the dynasty under which the chronicle was actually compiled, continued this long tradition of imperial relationship with Shaolin.
Yes, they did. Emperor Kangxi, one of China's most famous and long-reigning emperors, visited and bestowed imperial calligraphy plaques in 1704. These weren't just signed pieces. They were large, prominent plaques for major buildings.
Which ones?
Precious trees and fragrant lotuses for the Great Hall, the main worship hall, and Shaolin Temple for the Hall of Heavenly Kings, the entrance hall. These replaced older inscriptions and marked the monastery very clearly with his personal seal of approval.
And his successor, Yangsheng.
Emperor Yangsheng issued a significant edict in 1735 regarding the monastery's state. He noted its disrepair and ordered a major reconstruction project.
And Yangsheng's edict had a particularly interesting point about the monastic community itself, didn't it? Something about discipline.
Yes, it went beyond just ordering repairs to the buildings. He commented on the scattered nature of the 25 branch residences associated with Shaolin, and crucially noted the, undisciplined state of the monks living in them.
Oh, what did he mean?
He felt this was inappropriate for a proper khanlian, that's a large public monastic center, intended to operate with strict discipline and centralized management, kind of contrasting it with smaller, perhaps less regulated hermitages or temples. He saw the scattered branches as difficult to manage and a potential source of disrepute. It shows an imperial desire for order and centralized control within prominent Buddhist institutions like Shaolin.
And the state's role extended right to the very leadership of the monastery, appointing the abbot.
There's evidence of that. A Xunzi-era document from 1657, early in the Qing dynasty, details the public selection and imperial appointment of Abbot Haikuan, the 28th generation abbot. This confirms a tradition of imperial certificates being required for Shaolin abbots, placing the monastery's leadership under state oversight.
How significant was that?
Well, the document explicitly compares this process to the recognition given to the descendants of Confucius and the celestial masters in Taoism. So it places the Shaolin abbotship within a state-sanctioned hierarchy of spiritual and cultural importance. Haikuan, interestingly, had received a certificate from the previous deposed Ming dynasty, but he needed a new one from the king to legitimize his position under the new regime.
That's a really deep connection between state power and monastic life, right down to the leadership. Okay, let's step away from the imperial archives for a moment and explore the physical space of Shaolin itself, as described in these pages. The sacred landscape and the architecture are so vividly depicted, often interwoven with the history and legends.
Yeah, the chronicle and the visitor accounts together paint a very strong picture of the monastery and its surroundings. Mount Shaoxi, as we mentioned, is seen from afar like a 1,000-petaled flower, incredibly beautiful. But Yuan Hondao notes its strange beauty cannot be seen up close, only from a distance.
A bit mysterious.
Exactly. And climbing it, as Zhu Rúhéng found, was challenging, suggesting its true nature isn't easily approached or fully grasped.
And the five-tiered peak's protective role, embracing the monastery.
Exactly. That protective embrace is a recurring image, emphasizing how the natural world shelters the spiritual site. Its shape is likened to monks' hats and a phoenix spreading its wings, blending visual description with symbolic meaning. And of course, it's the location of the crucial wall-gazing cave.
Let's highlight some of the other key geographical sites within the monastery's domain, beyond just the main peaks. What stands out?
Well, there's Almsbull Peak, Boyu Feng shaped quite literally like an inverted alms bowl, which is home to the second patriarch's hall.
Right.
And as we touched on earlier, the specific detail that truly stands out here, the one that visitors commented on, is the presence of those 4 wells with distinct tasting water, said to have been created by Rúhéng striking his staff.
That's just such a unique detail.
It is. It adds this tangible, almost miraculous element to the description of the landscape, linking the spiritual history directly to a physical phenomenon you could experience.
The wall-gazing cave itself sounds like a place imbued with deep historical atmosphere based on the descriptions.
Oh, definitely. Visitors who made the trek described the chilling air inside, even in warm weather, and the strange ripple patterns on the stone walls, suggesting a unique geological or atmospheric quality. And then the inscriptions at the entrance, the first trace, and the place of silent origin, they immediately tell you this is no ordinary cave. It's a foundational, sacred site marking the arrival of Chan in China. The carving of Rúhéng standing in attendance inside just reinforces its connection to the lineage transmission.
And there are other landscape features tied to legends, aren't there? Dragons and things?
Yes, there's the dragon-rearing cliff located west of the cave. It's described as a cliff with a large fissure, believed to be the escape route of a dragon when Bodhidharma entered the cave, a legend that adds mythical depth to the geology. And the dragon drinking pool is a large stone trough at the base of Five-Teeted Peak, with a legend linking it to the 6th Patriarch's alms bowl miraculously providing water.
The Tiger Ravine also has a specific legend connected to the founder, Buddhapadra, right? Something about water.
Yes. It's described as a dry ravine with glistening stones, but if you listen closely, you can apparently hear the sound of a hidden underground spring. The legend, recorded in the Chronicle, says Buddhapadra magically stopped the water from flowing east.
Why would he do that?
Well, the story goes it was to prevent it from being used for Empress Wu Zetian's eventual burial site. This is a fascinating political and spiritual anecdote woven directly into the landscape, suggesting the monk's power could even influence imperial plans, at least in legend.
That's quite a claim, and the terrace is linked to the patriarch's practices.
Right. The demon-subduing terrace, also called the heart-seeking terrace, directly referencing Rúhéng's famous dialogue with Bodhidharma, is described as a flat-topped rock. It's situated either in front of the second patriarch's hall or sometimes on a precipice. This is where Rúhéng is said to have practiced walking meditation.
Was it easy to get to?
Apparently not always. Zhu Mengyang notes in his account that reaching it is difficult due to its steepness, and few people actually make the climb, which adds a sense of effort required to reach these important foundational sites. Then there's the Sweet Dew Terrace, Ganlu Tai, where sweet dew supposedly fell during Buddhapadra's scripture translation. It's marked by an ancient Zenwu hall, and Yuan Hondao mentions a striking ancient tree near it with roots like leaning stones and a hollow part like a bridge, adding a specific visual detail to the site.
The Chronicle also lists other features like Pearl Curtain Waterfall, Five Dragon Pool, and Manjushri Cave, adding to the sense of Mount Song as this really rich, spiritually charged landscape. Now, what about the buildings of the monastery itself? What picture do we get?
The overall impression from the texts is of a magnificent complex, magnificently situated, built within that embrace of Five-Teeted Peak. Visitors like the Prince of Hui and Zhu Mengyang are clearly struck by its scale and beauty, especially considering its remote mountain location.
Starting from the main entrance, the Mountain Gate.
The Mountain Gate was a significant structure, rebuilt by imperial order in 1735 during Yongzheng's reign. It was flanked by stone archways with couplets inscribed on them. Then you have the Hall of the Heavenly Kings.
Okay.
This hall used to bear an older plaque proclaiming it the first ancestral court under heaven. A pretty bold claim.
Mm-hmm.
But by 1748, it prominently displayed Emperor Kangxi's calligraphy plaque simply reading Shaolin Temple, signifying the king imperial stamp on the site.
And the main hall, the Mahavira Hall, the Great Hall.
Yes, this is the central place of worship. It housed Emperor Kangxi's other famous plaque, the one reading Precious Trees and Fragrant Lotuses. Zhou Mengyang, visiting back in the Ming Dynasty, noted the ancient and finely made incense burner in front of the Buddha, speculating it might even predate the Song Dynasty, suggesting the presence of very old artifacts within the main hall.
Any other notable halls mentioned?
There's the Kinara Hall, dedicated to the unique Dharma protector, King Kinara. He's said to have saved the monastery during a Yuan Dynasty rebel attack, appearing as a fiery figure working in the kitchen, which highlights a specific protective deity important to Shaolin's own legends and identity.
The patriarchs have dedicated halls too, right? often in more remote locations.
Exactly. The first Patriarch's Hall is actually a separate complex located northwest of the main monastery, closer to the wall-gazing cave. It's described as a scenic spot with ancient trees, and considered fundamentally important. Luo Hongxian calls it crucial, using a Confucian analogy to highlight its foundational status.
And the second and third patriarchs.
Their halls are situated in the surrounding mountains, marking the spots where they meditated. However, visitors like Wang Shixing and Zhu Mengyang mention that these were often difficult for tourists or officials to reach due to the rugged terrain. Reaching them required real effort.
The Vairocana Pavilion sounds particularly impressive, the one built by the Empress Dowager.
Yes, it seems to have been a standout structure. It's located behind the Mahavira Hall, built on a peak foundation by Empress Dowager Cixing during the Ming Dynasty, specifically to store that vast Tripitaka she donated.
How did visitors describe it?
Jin Zongxi calls it extremely magnificent, vast, and open. Zhu Mengyang notes it could be seen from a great distance due to its height, marking it as a prominent feature of the monastery complex and a very visible symbol of imperial patronage and scriptural preservation.
There's also mention of a 1,000 Buddha pavilion.
Yes, located behind the abbot's quarters on Luan Mountain. It was intended to house 1,000 Buddhas of Vairocana and is described as originally lofty and brilliant. However, the appeal for reconstruction, which is actually included in the 1748 Chronicle, explicitly states that by the time of compilation, this once magnificent structure was in ruins and urgently required reconstruction funds. This inclusion is significant because it highlights the ongoing state of decay and the constant need for repair that the compilers themselves were keenly aware of, even as they documented past glories.
And the Siyun Hermitage, or White-Robed Hall, dedicated to Guanyin, that had a history of rebuilding too.
It did. This hermitage had a history of destruction and rebuilding. Originally founded way back by Emperor Shaolin, it was later destroyed and then significantly rebuilt in 1674-75 during the Kangxi era. The record of reconstruction details this effort, led by a local figure named Zhang Ximing, Governor Wang, and monks Yunxi and Penghua, showing the collaboration between officials and monks in restoration efforts.
And there's a poignant detail connected to that site, isn't there? About some trees?
Yes, this is where the compiler's postscript comes in again. It's added to an earlier Ming stele by Liu Yuyu, which was specifically about protecting certain ancient cypresses near this hermitage. The postscript, added by the 1748 compiler, crucially notes that those very cypresses, specifically marked for protection by a magistrate acting on a prince's intention, were actually cut down for timber during the big 1735 renovation ordered by Emperor Yongzheng.
Wow, so even official protection wasn't always enough.
Exactly. This small, specific detail is a powerful illustration of how history, even recent history that was recorded on stone, could be physically erased. It underscores the very problem the Chronicle aimed to solve, the ongoing loss of the monastery's heritage, despite past efforts to preserve it.
And we even get glimpses into the practical, almost mundane architectural details from that now-lost kitchen and treasury stele by Gu Shaolian from the Tang Dynasty.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it shows the blend of the sacred and the very practical needs of running a large monastic community. Gu Shaolian's stele, though lost by 1748, is recorded as going into surprising detail about the reconstruction of the kitchen and storeroom design.
Like what kind of details?
He mentions specific features like the curved chimney designed to draw out smoke efficiently, vents for bad air, the specific arrangement of cooking pots, and even the security of the treasury with double doors and locks. This level of detail shows that even the functional aspects of the monastery were considered important enough to be commemorated in stone, reflecting a concern for both spiritual discipline and practical management.
One feature that repeatedly impressed visitors and was clearly important to the compilers was the sheer number of steles, these stone inscriptions, throughout the monastery grounds. The forest of steles.
Yes, Magistrate Shī Yìzān famously called it a forest of steles. These weren't just gravestones, they were historical markers, official records, imperial communications, visitor logs, philosophical treatises, poems, eulogies basically, the monastery's public memory carved in stone.
An archive in the open air.
Pretty much. Shī Yìzān notes they contained writings from the Tang and Song dynasties onwards, from emperors to scholars, and they were too numerous to count. Jiāo Rúhéng calls them enduring stone steles essential for the transmission of magnificent writings, while another contributor, Jiāo Yuanshan, sees them as a mirror for the future.
So they served multiple purposes: archive, public record, monument, philosophical text, historical narrative.
Precisely. They were the monastery's public memory, and its tangible connection to powerful figures and key historical events. They held imperial edicts and letters, recorded reconstruction efforts, welcomed and documented important visitors, eulogized eminent monks, contained philosophical discussions, and recounted crucial historical accounts like the monk's aid to Emperor Taizong. For the compilers of the 1748 Chronicle, they were absolutely vital primary sources for reconstructing Shaolin's long and complex history.
Let's delve into some of the key authors and the specific insights their texts, preserved on these steels, provide. Pei Kui from the Tang Dynasty is a significant early voice, right? His stele from 728 CE.
Yes, his Shaolin Monastery stele is a cornerstone for understanding early Shaolin. It's a dense, quite literary text. It covers the monastery's founding, the Northern Zhou abolition and its restoration, the Sui land grant, the bandit fire where the stupa survived.
We talked about those.
Right. And crucially, it details the Tang monks' aid to Taizong, specifying the land and watermill grants received in return. He also mentions auspicious signs like sparrows seen during the Tang, and those imperial visits and calligraphy gifts from Emperor Gaozong and Empress Wu Zixin. He poetically describes the monastery's location, referencing the twin mounts and the surrounding landscape. It's a really comprehensive snapshot from a relatively early point in Shaolin's history, highlighting its connection to both the natural world and the imperial court.
Gu Shaolin's kitchen and treasury stele from 804 CE, though unfortunately lost by 1748, sounds fascinating for what we know of its contents. That mix of philosophy and practicality.
It really is. This stele demonstrates the breadth of concerns at Shaolin. Gu Shaolin apparently discussed sophisticated Buddhist philosophy, touching on concepts like form and formless, and the use of skillful means, using an analogy like seeing a shape by looking at its shadow. He traced the history of Buddhism in China, listed miraculous events associated with early monks, Buddhapatra's stupa surviving the fire, Sen Chao stopping tigers, White cutting off his arm, and described Shaolin's location. But then it shifted to those incredible practical details about the reconstruction of the kitchen and storeroom, the curved chimney, the vents, the pot arrangement, the security measures. This lost stele uniquely shows how abstract philosophical concerns coexisted with the very real mundane needs of maintaining a large monastic institution day to day.
Wu Yongshuan's Yuan Dynasty stele about reconstructing the Bodhidharma stele connects past preservation efforts to the present and highlights imperial patronage under the Yuan, even under Mongol rule.
Exactly. The stele, also lost by 1748 but recorded in the Chronicle, was commissioned by the Empress Dowager of the Yuan Dynasty to recarve Emperor Wu of Lian's original, now lost, stele for Bodhidharma.
So, replacing a lost relic with a copy?
Yes. Wu Yongshuan discussed Bodhidharma's hiding, his interaction with Emperor Wu, his departure, and the meeting with Song Yin. But the key insight here is his praise for the Yuan dynasty's support for preserving these Buddhist relics, showing the continuity of imperial patronage towards Shaolin's foundational figures and sacred objects, acknowledging their importance even under a non-Han dynasty.
Moving to the Ming Dynasty, Luo Hongxian's record about reconstructing the first patriarch's hall highlights the core of Chan practice, doesn't it?
It does. He emphasizes Bodhidharma's 9 years of wall-gazing and describes it poetically as constantly chanting the true sutra and constantly building precious temples, framing the silent, still meditation itself as the most profound form of practice and construction. He used a famous Confucian analogy, comparing a difficulty of grasping profound teachings to finding the sources of the Zushui and Sishui rivers, suggesting that just as Emperor Wu missed Bodhidharma's message, true understanding is hard to come by. This shows the use of classical Chinese scholarship to interpret Buddhist concepts within the monastery's discourse.
Dong Qicheng, a truly famous Ming scholar, official, calligrapher, and painter, wrote 2 steles for a certain Master Dao. His involvement must have been significant.
Oh, hugely significant. His stelas, the one was broken and the other lost by 1748, were important because of his immense stature as a cultural figure. Written and calligraphed by him, they lent enormous prestige to the monastery and the monk he commemorated, Master Wu Kangdao.
What did he write about?
He discussed deep philosophical points like the nature of Buddha versus ordinary beings, and linked the 3 karmas, body, speech, mind, to Vinaya rules, sutras, scriptures, and Chan, meditation, suggesting there are different paths to the same realization. He repeatedly calls Shaolin the ancestral court of Chan and its monks patriarchs.
And he linked Shaolin to a specific school of Chan.
Yes. Crucially, he specifically identifies Shaolin with the Caodong lineage, a major school of Chan Buddhism. He briefly explained some of its key tenets, like the 3 samadhis of the precious mirror and the 5 ranks of lord and minister, sophisticated methods for understanding the interplay of absolute and relative truth. He even calls their methods for discerning demons and heretics the most precise.
Wow, high praise.
It is. He also recounts the admirable story of Master Dao's humility in refusing the abbotship for 14 years, his eventual appointment by the Ministry of Rites, his pure practice, and his awakening under his own master Hong Xi-Run, even including a snippet of their awakening dialogue. It's a rich mix of philosophy, lineage history, and personal biography.
Wang Qishu, another prominent Ming figure, also wrote a stele for Master Dao, apparently with Dong Qicheng's calligraphy as well.
Yes. This stele, also lost, echoed Dong Qicheng's themes. It discussed the transmission of the wondrous mind of nirvana and the vastness of the Tripitaka. Like Dong Qicheng, he explicitly links Shaolin to the Caodong school and its 5 ranks of lord and minister framework. And using this context, he explicitly calls Shaolin the India of China.
The India of China, that's a profound compliment.
It really is. It positions Shaolin as the place in China where the authentic Dharma transmission, specifically of Chan, originated and continued, making it equivalent in importance, in this view, to Buddhism's birthplace.
The visitor records add such a different dimension, a personal, ground-level view of Shaolin at various points in time. Jin Zongxi's 1748 account is particularly detailed and engaging, especially since it's from the same year the chronicle was finalized.
It's exactly. As a high-ranking king official, writing in the very year the chronicle was compiled, his account gives us a direct sense of what Shaolin was like right then. He provides a rich, personal narrative, describing his journey and the views of Mount Song from different perspectives, his arrival at the monastery, the officials present for his visit, and the specific sites he was shown.
Which sites did he mention?
The Standing in Snow Pavilion, the Forest of Steels, where he specifically notes the historical value of the Taizong letter as supplementing official history, the Sweet Dew Terrace, and the First Patriarch's Hall. He is particularly struck by the strangeness of the Shadow Stone's substance, echoing Wang Shixing's observation. And he notes, amusingly, that the monks mistakenly pointed out the wrong pagoda tree to visitors.
A bit of tourist misinformation even then.
Apparently. He even describes watching the monks practice martial arts. But his visit was official and somewhat rushed, evident in his regret about not having more time or a better view, and his hurried departure. His colleague Fu Mei's postscript adds context about a drought at the time and Jin's compassion as an official, adding a humanizing touch. This account really makes the chronicle subject come alive in the present of its compilation.
Yuan Hongdao's Ming Dynasty visit record offers a more reflective and philosophical perspective. He was a famous writer, wasn't he?
Yes, a very famous late Ming literary figure, and his account is highly personal and insightful. He compares Shaolin's preserved state favorably to the ruined historical sites around Luoyang, which he found disheartening. This shows Shaolin's relative resilience even then.
Did he interact with the monks?
He did. He engages in a fascinating Chan exchange with the head monk, Taoist Chushi, who was a descendant of the Caodong lineage. Yuan Hongdao asks him, "Does the Taoist wish to place this mountain in the middle of a bustling city?" To which the monk gives the classic Chan answer about carrying the mountain to the city, meaning true practice can happen anywhere. It's about the mind.
And what sites did he describe?
He vividly describes the sites. The ancient, striking tree at Sweet Dew Terrace, his philosophical interpretation of the Shadow Stone, the adding legs to a snake idea, and the challenging climb to the First Patriarch's cave, noting the cold air and the curled stone inside. He describes the vast view from Huai's heart-seeking terrace, seeing the Yi, Luo, and Yellow rivers. He feels this deep, almost spiritual familiarity, writing traces of my robes and shoes here, as if he belonged there or had been there before. He also describes watching the monks' martial arts demonstration and reflects thoughtfully on the difficulty of seeing Shaoxi's true beauty up close, comparing it to obscured heroes and scholars, using a personal anecdote from his travels. It's very literary.
Zhu Mingyang's Ming visit account sounds full of sensory details, personal effort, and specific observations, almost like a travel blog from the 16th century.
It really reads that way. His account is very experiential. He describes seeing the magnificent Vairocana pavilion from afar as he approached, being guided by monks, and his slight frustration when the abbot seemed to have limited knowledge about the details of the stalls.
What sites did he focus on?
He describes visiting the First Patriarch's Hall, noting the winding path, the difficult steps, the ancient tree roots, the statue, the shadow stone, the 6th Patriarch's cypress, and the 3 flowers of Shaoxi, Vine's very specific details. He details the challenging climb to the second patriarch's hall on Boyu Peak, noting that his high-ranking eunuch companion was actually afraid and the steps were dangerous.
And the wells.
Yes. He reaches the 4 wells on Boyu Peak, drinks the water, and finds its distinct taste strange. He describes reaching the demon-subduing terrace, noting its steepness and how few people make it, and revels in the vast view of the rivers in Yellow River from there. He stayed late, waiting for the moon, and was reluctant to leave the next morning, constantly looking back at Tianmen Peak. His account really conveys the physical and sensory experience of exploring Shaolin's remote sacred sites.
Liu Yuyu's record about protecting specific cypresses south of the stream reveals a more practical side of preservation and, through that compiler's postscript we discussed, powerfully underscores the very problem the chronicle aimed to combat.
Exactly. Liu Yu wrote this still as a magistrate back in 1568 during the Long Qing era, acting on the Prince of Zhu's intention to promote Buddhism by protecting specific ancient cypresses near the Xi'an hermitage. It's a record of a local official taking concrete steps, supported by royalty, to preserve a natural feature seen as part of the monastery's heritage.
But then the postscript.
Right. The compiler's postscript in the 1748 Chronicle adds that heartbreaking detail. Those specific cypresses that Liu Yu commemorated and tried to protect were cut down for timber during the major 1735 renovation ordered by Emperor Yongsheng. This detail, added almost as an editorial note by the 1748 compilers, is incredibly significant. It demonstrates that despite official and royal intentions, historical records and even protected physical features could be lost, highlighting the constant struggle against decay and change and reinforcing the urgent motivation behind compiling the chronicle itself. It shows preservation wasn't a guarantee.
And these sources explicitly mention the loss of important records over time, reinforcing that sense of urgency for the compilers.
Yes. The chronicle notes the loss of Emperor Wu of Liang's original stele for Bodhidharma, Gu Shaolian's kitchen, and treasury stele, one of Dong Qichang's steles for Master Dao, those protected cypresses mentioned by Liu Yu, and the precept platform stele. Acknowledging these lost records underscores the scale of the challenge the compilers faced and positions their work as a crucial act of preservation against further loss, trying to capture what remained.
Let's shift our focus now slightly to the internal life of the monastery, its spiritual heart. The chronicle provides insights into its lineage, practice, and philosophy.
Right. At its spiritual core, the chronicle firmly establishes and reaffirms the Chan lineage originating at Shaolin, Bodhidharma transmitting the Dharma to Huike, who transmitted to Senken, and so on. Shaolin is presented unequivocally as the definitive source of this transmission in China, the fount, as it were.
And it specifically identifies Shaolin with a particular branch or school of Chan Buddhism, doesn't it?
Yes, the sources explicitly state that Shaolin follows the Caodong lineage. This lineage is traced back from the Tang Dynasty master Shitu Shikuan via Yaoshan Wayang and Yunyan Tansheng to the school's founders Dongshan Liangji and Koshan Benji.
And the chronicle explains what that means.
The description of the Caodong school in the chronicle, echoed by scholars like Dong Qichang and Wang Shiju in their steles, highlights its key tenets and methods, things like the 3 samadhis of the precious mirror and the 5 ranks of lord and minister. These are sophisticated philosophical frameworks for understanding the interplay between the absolute emptiness and the relative phenomena, and applying this understanding in Chan practice. Dong Qichang calls their methods for discerning truth from delusion or discerning demons the most precise.
So a very specific philosophical and meditative tradition, but the chronicle also shows that Shaolin wasn't solely about Chan meditation, right? It embraced a broader approach to Buddhist practice.
That's an important nuance revealed in the sources, yeah. While Chan is central, Shaolin is the ancestral court of Chan, the chronicle also mentions the importance of Vinaya, the monastic rules and discipline and doctrinal studies based on scriptures.
Like who?
Monk Huiguang, Buddhapadra's first native Chinese student, is praised for excelling in both Chan and doctrinal study. Monk Hongsun is mentioned for translating scriptures and lecturing on Vinaya, and the famous interaction between Monk Huiguang and the celebrated poet Bai Juyi perfectly encapsulates this integration.
What did Huiguang say?
Huiguang explained that while Vinaya is body practice, Dharma, scriptural study preaching, is speech practice, and Chan is mind practice, meditation, their ultimate attainment is one. It's like different names for the same river water. This shows that for some prominent Shaolin monks, a comprehensive Buddhist path included discipline, study, and meditation, all integrated into a single pursuit of enlightenment. It wasn't necessarily one or the other.
The chronicle also gives us glimpses into the lives and practices of individual monks beyond the main patriarchs, highlighting different aspects of monastic life over the centuries.
Yes, quite a few interesting figures pop up. There's Baowen, an unusual figure who was actually an imperial exam scholar before becoming a monk. He was invited by a prime minister to teach, indicating his intellectual stature, but he was known for his strange and paradoxical Dharma talks, using phrases like iron ox set free, or describing the bright moon and the reed flowers. This suggests a more unconventional, perhaps shocking or non-rational teaching style existed within Shaolin's history, too.
Fu Yu, the Yuan dynasty abbot, stands out for his administrative and revival efforts, especially after periods of destruction.
Yes, Shueding Fuyu, as he was also known. He was appointed abbot by Kublai Khan himself after the destruction at the end of the Song-Yuan Wars. He was a pivotal figure, instrumental in rebuilding structures, reviving the monastic community, and attracting many disciples. He effectively brought the monastery back from ruin to prominence under Yuan rule. He was even posthumously titled Duke by the Yuan court, showing significant imperial recognition for his crucial efforts. His Dharma heir, Rúhéng, continued his work, even securing a Tripitaka for the monastery.
Qīnchǒng is another interesting figure mentioned, known for his blend of spiritual attainment and literary skill.
Yeah, he's said to have been born with the character for mercy on his hand, which is quite a detail. After a brief period of returning to lay life, he reordained and received the full Caodong lineage transmission, complete with the symbolic kasaya, robe, seal, and whisk. He was highly skilled in poetry and prose, which drew large crowds who requested his writings. This indicates that artistic and literary accomplishment was also valued within the monastic community, perhaps seen as an expression of enlightenment.
Wenzai sounds like a more traditional learned abbot from the Ming dynasty.
Yes, he was a Zhengde-era abbot, early 16th century. He is described as having studied the Tripitaka extensively and being well-read in other books, attracting thousands of disciples. He represents that scholarly, doctrinal side of Shaolin's tradition.
And then there's the fascinating, almost countercultural figure of the big-shoed monk, Dasing.
He's a wonderful anecdote, isn't he? Provides a really different perspective on attainment. The chronicle includes the story of Dasing, who was seemingly uneducated, couldn't read, but lived a simple, austere life in Bodhidharma's cave, wearing these large, distinctive shoes.
How did he practice?
He begged for food, but refused anything extra, fearing it would cause trouble or attachment. When asked about the way by visiting scholars, his answers were simple but profound. Like telling a scholar troubled by his thoughts to earnestly get rid of it, that's it, because the mind cannot accept it. He represents a more rustic, purely practice-focused ideal, completely outside the world of learning and official connections.
Why did he disappear?
The story says he eventually disappeared because more and more people are coming. There is still damage and leakage, suggesting that even the recognition of his simple attainment led to fame that disrupted his quiet practice. He's a powerful figure, highlighting that profound understanding could be found outside conventional monastic paths.
The steles themselves also contain various philosophical nuggets embedded within their historical narratives or eulogies.
Yes, they offer fragmented but valuable insights into the intellectual life of the monastery over time. Monk Bienden, commemorated by the Prince of Xinjiang, demonstrated an understanding of emptiness, stating his body itself is an illusion and inside I am also empty, directly linking this realization to receiving the special transmission outside the teachings.
Any others?
Gu Shaolian's Lost Stele touched on form and formless and the concept of skillful means. Jiāo Qīnchǒng, in the Appeal for Reconstruction written around 1748, linked Buddhist equality to Confucian virtues like loyalty and forgiveness, suggesting the desire for great salvation wasn't separate from cultivating ethical conduct in the world, bridging traditions.
Dong Qichang and Wang Shiju's Stales for Master Dao contain significant philosophical reflections on Chan, as we discussed.
Right. Dong Qichang explicitly notes that while Chan is closest to the Buddha, relying solely on it isn't enough for the transmission of the mind, implying the importance of lineage and guidance, and he highlights the Caodong school's precision in discerning truth. Wang Shiju speaks of the transmission of the wondrous mind of nirvana and the interplay of the 5 ranks, positioning Shaolin as the source of this profound understanding in China.
And others emphasize the importance of transmission and interpretation.
Yes. Xu Yujin, in his Stele for Master King, emphasizes that without receiving the transmission, one cannot truly know the mind and see one's nature, underscoring the crucial role of lineage in Chan. And Yuan Liaofan, in his record for Huangxi Run, reflects on the non-duality of the Dharma realm and mind, seeing the division of teachings and schools as a sign of decline from a unified truth. He warns that diligent practice without true interpretation, without understanding the meaning behind the practice, is just accumulating dusty traces. These different voices offer varied insights into the spiritual and intellectual currents associated with Shaolin over centuries.
Now, the Chronicle isn't just a record of glory and spiritual attainment, it also unflinchingly documents the significant periods of destruction and challenges Shaolin faced throughout its long history.
Yes, it's very clear about that. The sources repeatedly mention destruction. There were those bandit fires at the end of the Sui dynasty we mentioned. There was the state-ordered abolition of Buddhism during the Northern Zhou. There was significant damage and burning at the end of the Yuan dynasty, where the record says it was only half preserved. And statues were damaged by ignorant commoners searching for hidden things supposedly inside them.
And later periods, too.
During the decline of the Ming dynasty, it faced the peril of being occupied by the Red Eyebrows rebels, described as a calamity from the southern mountains. And even by the time of the Qing compilation, Emperor Yongzheng's edict in 1735 explicitly states the monastery had fallen into disrepair over the years, requiring a major reconstruction. It wasn't just ancient history. Decay was an ongoing reality.
So this wasn't just isolated events. It was a recurring cycle of destruction and decay that the monastery had to endure.
Exactly. The narrative of the Chronicle shows this constant need for repair and reconstruction efforts undertaken by both monks and supportive officials and patrons. It was a continuous struggle.
Who were some of the key figures involved in these rebuilding efforts mentioned in the Chronicle besides the emperors?
Well, the Prince of Hui undertook significant reconstruction in 1553 during the Ming. Monks like Renshin and Baoxun rebuilt the Dharma Hall and Chan Hall, respectively, after the decline at the end of the Yuan dynasty, showing monastic self-reliance and leadership in recovery.
And during the turbulent Ming-Qing transition.
Abbot Haikuan, also known as Biandashi, was crucial during that period, around 1652-1653. He is described vividly as preserving the Buddha's wheel in an age of destruction and restoring the Buddha land. And the record notes he received crucial official support and funding from Prefect Xu and Commissioner Fan, showing that collaboration was key.
Others later on.
Zhang Siming led the rebuilding of Xiyun Hermitage in 1674-75, again with official backing. Yongzheng's edict initiated that major state-sponsored reconstruction in 1735. And as late as 1748, the Appeal for Reconstruction of the Thousand Buddha Pavilion, included in the Chronicle, highlights that even then, magnificent structures were in ruins and needed funds, showing that the struggle against decay was continuous right up to the moment of compilation.
But despite these periods of destruction and the constant need for repair, the Chronicle emphasizes Shaolin's remarkable resilience, doesn't it?
It really does. Zhang Huilin, in his preface, makes a point of noting that despite everything, the monastery has never lost its original site. The sacred stupa miraculously survived the Sui fire. The core identity, the lineage of Chan transmission, and the spiritual significance persisted through it all. And the very act of compiling this chronicle in 1748, gathering fragmented records and documenting what remained, was itself a conscious act of preserving this legacy against the forces of loss and oblivion. It was an effort to ensure that even if buildings fell, the history and spirit would be remembered.
We've touched on it a couple of times, but let's address the aspect Shaolin is perhaps most famous for globally: martial arts. How does the Chronicle present this skill? Where does it fit in?
The Chronicle grounds the martial arts connection firmly in that pivotal historical event we discussed. The Tang Dynasty monks aiding Emperor Taizong.
Right, capturing Wang Renzai.
Exactly. The Peiki stele details their righteous and brave act, which led directly to monk Tanzong's appointment as a general and the significant land grant. And Jinzongxi's 1748 visitor record explicitly links this historical event to the fact that, to this day, the monks of the monastery are known for their martial skills.
So it's presented primarily as a skill rooted in a specific historical military contribution, which then became a tradition. Did visitors in the Ming and Qing periods still see evidence of this practice?
Yes, they did. Visitors like Yuan Hongdao and Wenjiang Fēng describe actually witnessing the monks practicing combat. They observed demonstrations of hand-to-hand techniques, swords, and halberds. Yuan Hongdao notes that many had exceptional skills, and Wenjiang Fēng refers to it simply as a custom of the mountain, indicating it was a well-established part of monastic life, at least visible enough for visitors to comment on.
So while the Chronicle doesn't delve into, say, specific techniques or philosophies of martial arts, it confirms the historical basis and continued practice of these skills at Shaolin, presenting it as a notable characteristic intertwined with its history and identity.
Precisely. It's part of the picture, rooted in that Tang Dynasty event.
The visitor accounts, in particular, really bring the experience of being at Shaolin to life for the reader centuries later. They add so much color.
They offer such rich personal perspectives, don't they? You see the contrast between those official, sometimes rushed visits like Jin Zongxi's, who saw things mostly from his carriage and regretted his lack of time to explore properly, and the more leisurely, reflective, and physically demanding visits experienced by scholars like Yuan Hongdao and Zhu Mengyang, who took the time to climb the peaks, sit, absorb the atmosphere, and contemplate the surroundings.
What kind of sensory details do they share that make the place feel real, almost like you're there?
Oh, quite a few. Zhu Zhu, in his brief piece, mentions shaded paths where the sun didn't fully penetrate and the lingering fragrance of flowers and grass. Wang Shixing and Zhu Mengyang describe that chilling air inside the wall-gazing cave, giving it a really palpable atmosphere. Ku Ershi mentions the sound of bells carried by water and wind, a sound that evokes the remote mountain setting. Zhu Mengyang notes the sound of flutes and drums welcoming him on arrival.
And the taste of the water.
Yes, the taste of the water from the 4 wells on Boyu Peak, which Wang Shixing found strangely distinct, and Zhu Mengyang also commented on after his difficult climb. And the sound of the hidden underground spring in the Tiger Ravine is another example of the landscape engaging the senses.
They also describe moments of wonder alongside the very real difficulty of navigating the terrain, don't they?
Absolutely. Zhu Mengyang vividly describes the extremely dangerous cliff steps required to climb Boyu Peak, noting his high-ranking eunuch companion was too afraid to continue. When Fēng mentions his students panting and refusing to go further up the difficult mountain paths on horseback, highlighting the physical effort involved in reaching the remote sites.
But then the payoff.
Then there are the moments of wonder. The strange substance of the Shadow Stone, the vast, magnificent views from high points like Boyu Peak, and the demon-subduing terrace, where Wang Shixing and Zhu Mengyang could see for hundreds of li, including the Yi, Liuwas, and even the Yellow River stretching out below like ribbons. That must have been breathtaking.
And their personal reflections add a layer of emotional connection, making them more than just travelogues.
Definitely. Yuan Hongdao felt that deep sense of familiarity, as if he'd been dream traveling to this mountain for a long time, suggesting a spiritual or imaginative connection prior to his physical visit. Zhu Zhu compared Huai's unwavering sincerity in the snow to the dedication of Confucian disciples, finding resonance across different traditions. And Jin Zongxi openly expressed his frustration and regret about his hurried schedule, limiting his ability to see and explore fully. You feel his disappointment.
They even note some specific oddities or slightly awkward moments, which makes it feel very human.
Yeah, those little details are great. Jin Zongxi mentions the monks mistakenly pointing out a different, less significant pagoda tree to tourists, a small, relatable human error. He also expressed his officials' disapproval that the steel-bearing, flattering words by the notoriously treacherous Tang official Li Linfu had been allowed to remain standing and hadn't been scraped clean or removed.
A bit of historical judgment there.
Seems so. And Zhu Mengyang's account of his high-ranking eunuch companion being too afraid to climb the steep steps with him is another specific, slightly humorous detail that makes the experience feel very real and unvarnished.
So bringing it all back to the document itself, what is the ultimate legacy of this Shaolin Monastery Chronicle Volume 1, compiled in 1748? What does it represent?
Well, I think the most significant legacy is the act of compilation itself, driven by that palpable sense of urgency. As Zhang Huilin and Jia Wangqian emphasize in their prefaces, and as that Lu Yuyu postscript about the cut-down cypresses so powerfully demonstrates, this chronicle was a crucial effort to preserve history and specific details that were actively being lost to decay, destruction, and the simple passage of time. It's a conscious effort to combat forgetting.
And it provides a uniquely multifaceted view of Shaolin, bringing together so many different kinds of sources.
It truly does. By incorporating imperial edicts, official reports, scholarly essays, monastic biographies, visitor accounts, descriptions of the physical space, the legends, the relics, It brings together multiple perspectives: political, administrative, intellectual, spiritual, personal, geographical, to create a really complex, nuanced picture of the monastery's history, significance, and even its daily life over centuries.
It really shows the interconnectedness of everything there.
Yeah, it clearly shows the deep interconnectedness of political power, religious practice, intellectual endeavor, local culture, and even the landscape itself at Shaolin over centuries. Nothing existed in isolation.
And it stands as a testament to the enduring fame and perceived spiritual significance of the place, doesn't it? That's why people cared enough to write about it and preserve it.
Absolutely. That significance is precisely what motivated emperors and officials to grant land, order repairs, issue decrees, and write commendations. It's what drew scholars and poets to visit, document their experiences, and compose eulogies and philosophical texts. It's what drove monks to diligently practice, preserve the lineage, and rebuild structures after disaster. And crucially, it's what compelled compilers like Jiāo Rúhéng and his collaborators to undertake the monumental, painstaking task of collecting fragmented records and documented everything they could find. It's a record of a place that people from all walks of life deeply valued and felt compelled to preserve for future generations.
But even while compiling it, the authors were acutely aware that preservation was an ongoing struggle, not some kind of finished project.
Yes, that comes through clearly. They explicitly acknowledged the loss of important steles and records, the ruin of buildings even within living memory, like the Thousand Buddha Pavilion, and the continuous need for funds and repair. The Chronicle isn't presented as a complete, definitive history covering everything Shaolin ever was. It's more like a deliberate, dedicated effort at a specific point in time, 1748, to capture and consolidate its essence before more was lost forever. It highlights the fragility of historical memory and physical structures.
So what does this deep dive into the Shaolin Monastery Chronicles Volume 1 ultimately leave us with? What are the big takeaways?
Well, I think we've seen Shaolin emerge from these pages, not just as a simple place or a single legendary story, but as a truly complex, layered history. A history constantly shaped by the dynamic interactions between imperial power, military events, spiritual leaders, intellectual currents, natural disasters, and the dedicated efforts of those who lived there or were drawn to it.
We've explored the legends of its founders, walked through its sacred sites guided by these centuries-old visitor accounts, and heard the diverse voices of those who felt compelled to document its story, from emperors down to scholars and simple monks.
And this chronicle serves as a powerful reminder, I think, that the transmission of knowledge, whether it's the profound spiritual teachings of Chan Buddhism or the detailed records of a 1,000-year-old institution, requires diligent effort. It requires overcoming obstacles, recovering from loss and decay, and finding supporters who truly understand and value its importance enough to invest in its preservation.
It's fundamentally a story of incredible resilience, isn't it? Of a tradition and an institution adapting, facing destruction time and again, and yet somehow persisting through monumental political, social, and natural changes, always returning to its foundational figures, its spiritual core, and the remarkable landscape that cradles it.
It really is. Yeah. And maybe here's something to ponder as we navigate our own world, our own time. In our age, where information feels so abundant but is often fragmented, ephemeral, constantly changing, what are our steles and chronicles? How do we identify, preserve, and ensure that the knowledge, the history, the wisdom we value are not lost to the vicissitudes of time or simply overlooked and forgotten in the sheer volume of digital information? How do we engage in our own acts of deliberate, dedicated preservation for the future?
That was our deep dive into the Shaolin Monastery Chronicles, Volume 1. Thank you for sharing these fascinating sources and insights with us.